Welcome everybody. Today's office hours, we're going to have some fun, actually look at some of the ways to manage your suite of workflows. So many times people get into Realvolve, they look at all the workflows that they've got, and it can be overwhelming. And just how do you manage those? How do you understand how to put them together? There's a lot of different things that we are planning on looking at. Kendra's put together an amazing array of slides and information that I want us to get into. Before we actually get started, let's do some introductions. My name is Mark Stepp. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at Realvolve, and spent the last 30 plus years, 32 years, going through and helping agents understand automation, sustainability within their business using automation, and just overall real estate technology, and understanding the why of everything that we do here at Realvolve is important. My cohort in this, Kendra, go ahead and introduce yourself on this.
Yeah, my name is Kendra Rao, and I work in the Premium Services Department. We work one-on-one with realtors and really help you optimize and maximize your business and your success. And I love, like Mark said, I'm excited about what we're talking about because it's so important and so often overlooked. And it's hard to, and I've been a licensed agent, I think, for 8 or 9 years now. My first year, I did 54 deals. I had no idea what I was doing. Came from a business management background, so I understand that part, and I knew what to do. I was just running full speed. But once you start running full speed, it's so hard to stop and say, how do I organize what I'm doing in a way that I can, that benefits my business and actually makes everything that I'm doing a business. And so what we're talking about today is just, it's so critical in understanding the power of workflows, and then managing them in a way where your business itself is managed. So I'm excited about what we're talking about. We're going to go over, ways to organize your workflows, and also give you some additional help and support if you need it outside of these office hours. Our giveaway today, I put together a package. It's really kind of a worksheet that allows you to think about the hierarchy of your workflows and your business management processes. And so it's really something that I think is beneficial for you to take away and spend some time to think about and to implement. And so, workflows are part of your business processes. And I knew the importance of it very early on. And I painstakingly spent years building my workflows, and I overthought. And I see so many agents now that they know what they're doing, but it's so hard to put it on paper, and it's so hard to implement workflows. Our entire department's, dedicated to doing that, to make sure that you are set up with these workflows, they're put into place, and that you hit the ground running, and that you're set up for success. So you may be working with workflows now. If you're not, I hope that you take something out of this and you start using workflows. If you're currently using workflows, I hope you take the suite of workflows that you have and look at it from a very high level, and see kind of what you're doing now and what you potentially could be doing in the future. And so to do that, you really have to step back and take a look at what you're currently doing now, okay? So at a very basic level, if you're doing transactions, we have transaction to close workflows. If you're taking listings, your listing appointment, pre-MLS, active MLS, and we're gonna go through all of these in detail. And then you probably have some kind of client management or lead management workflows, or at least processes, even if they're not in workflows yet. The other part of that is you have to take what you're currently doing now and understand where your pain points are. You have to understand what you're doing and where it could be optimized, and what your current needs are. So if you build, a workflow for something that doesn't align with your business, it's not necessarily going to help you. And so a lot of times when you're there's no shortage of places to get information in real estate. You can go on YouTube and go down a rabbit hole for 6 hours, and you come up with 14 different things that you would love to implement. But I think the importance of where success comes from is taking those pain points. Okay. Where are the things that I'm spending the most amount of time? What are the things that I could get off of my plate that would leverage my business? And those are where workflows help you. You want to be able to create a process tree or an overview and kind of understand what's happening when and how all of your workflows work together. And then you want to implement them, because a suite of workflows sitting in your library doesn't do anything for you, but really understanding that, when you use them and how you use them is also critical for success.
Whenever I talk about this a lot, Kendra, I use the analogy of design, build, run, repeat. And the idea is, design your workflows, build your workflows, run those workflows, and then as you complete them, kind of go back in, analyze what went well, what didn't go well, and then make changes. The run repeat part of it is go back to the design mode. Was there something that could have been done better? Is there something that I should have done to prevent some confusion by the customer of some sort? And then add that into the workflow the next time. And it gets to a point where you do this design, build, run, repeat process enough times that you get it and you get it good. You get into that idea of everything's running smoother because I've taken the time to get these in place.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that when, a lot of people, I think there's some pushback where, a successful agent may not see the benefit in stopping to do this, but to go from, successful to, expansive, or to have the ability to take some of these things off your plate and add an admin or whatever, all of this is critical to your success. And really, when you think about it in the beginning, I'm like, well, what do you put in a workflow? What should be a workflow, and what do I just know how to do? And I kind of made this slide because it just reminds me of how I spent several years, I was doing things, and, and I get this from other agents too. And it's like, well, I just know to do that, but that's not success, because I always think of it like juggling balls, right? So if I start throwing balls to you, Mark, you're going to juggle. I mean, you may be amazing and juggle 5, 6, but at some point your balls start to fall, and they start to fall everywhere. Then you're running around picking up balls. And that's what I feel like even successful agents are doing, because they know what to do, but they're just doing it reactively. There's not that pause and that thought process and putting it into workflows and processes so that your business is running like an assembly line. And that's where you can start putting people into your assembly line, and you can back out and breathe, and then you don't get burnout. If I just had one agent that, didn't suffer from burnout from the things that we do, which I know we're successful at doing that, then I'm very, very successful in my job, because I know how that feels. And that is my one goal for people, to make sure that they don't feel like that they're stuck in the cog, like that they're just, spinning and spinning and spinning, because eventually you do burn out. And workflows and taking a step back and looking at things from a very high level is how you stop that. That's how you prevent it and make, your business even more successful than you already are. So, in here, be proactive, not reactive. Okay. So, each one of these things, this may be a general day in an agent, and they may, you get an email coming in, you get a phone call, you get a text message, and you're just handling all of those things. I don't like that. Okay. I want to step back and say, I know that 6 days after I put somebody under contract, I need to do X, Y, Z. I want a checklist of things that I need to do here. I want to preemptively know what I need to do and when I need to do it, because I've done it several times. So I can take the thought prior to things happening, put it into place so that I can automate, I can make things easier, and I can anticipate and not just be working from a reactive state all the time. So when I first started putting my workflow suite together, I bought, I think it's like a 4x8 whiteboard, and I just started scribbling on it, drawing it. My workflow suite may not look like your workflow suite, but the point is a lot of things are going to be common regardless of how you work. Okay. When you put a seller under contract, so we're going to talk about sellers and just kind of the life cycle of a seller. So the first thing you really want to think about is, how are you getting your seller? And it's probably a variety of ways. And so I've put a few on here: circle of influence, farming, pay-per-click. Somehow, some way that seller came into your wheelhouse, okay? They came on your radar. Now, sometimes we handle the marketing or some of these things inside of Realvolve in workflows, but let's say that it's handled outside of Realvolve. Realvolve does a really good job of capturing information, lead information, and doing certain things with it. And so maybe, a lot of these different ways are technically seller leads, right? So the seller comes into your wheelhouse, and you're going to put them on a workflow. In this case, seller lead. Your seller lead workflow may look different than my seller lead workflow, but again, the thought process is the same. I have a seller that has essentially raised their hand somehow, some way. And what am I going to do with them, right? I need to make contact with them. I need to vet them. I need to see if they're going to do a listing appointment. I essentially want to get them out of being a lead and into being a prospect, and hopefully on a listing appointment workflow. Okay, I take a listing appointment, they give me the business, they sign with me, I start them on my pre-MLS workflow. Essentially everything that I'm going to do from the time that that I know that I have the business until it goes active on the market. Then I'm going to start them on my active MLS workflow. If the seller wants an open house, I'm going to simultaneously run my active open house and my active MLS and my open house workflow. Once I put that seller under contract, I'm going to take them off of that workflow and I'm going to put them on seller contract to close. Now, on the day of closing, I have a task that says, start those sellers on my 10-year of contact nurture, essentially ensuring that I celebrate their birthdays, home purchase anniversaries, and I touch base with them every so often. So whatever the situation, it's really important that you have a flow of process. So you want to stop and you want to think about, what are the last 4 or 5 deals that I did? Where did that seller come from and what happened with them? What was their flow process? And more than likely what happened is, hopefully, success is not on the day of closing. Success is understanding that I need to nurture that relationship with that person for life. And have I done something to ensure that that person is now in my wheelhouse forever?
Yeah, one of the things that I've taught for years now is the core strategies, and that breaks it down into conversions, operations, retention, and experiences. And it's just a cycle. And it's just, if you understand that cycle, but the conversion parts, all the things you do for lead management, the operations, all the things that you do from the time they sign the listing agreement to closing day. The retention is all the things that you do from closing day to the end of their time in that property, or they want to move to a new property of some sort. And it's all wrapped up in the experience. And if you give them a good experience, they will come back to you. And that's kind of the thought about that core strategies is just bring them through the entire process. And you're going to nurture them over and over again throughout the process, no matter where they're at, but you're giving them that experience. But I love that.
Yeah. And then when you bring up experience, it reminds me, because like we're going on to buyers right now, and I put 4 or 5 ways that you can get buyers here. There's no shortage of marketing plans or anything else. The important thing is that, I'd rather have 2 lead generation techniques that I have nailed and thoughtfully, put into process, and I have those as, wash, rinse, and repeat, rather than have 15 ideas that I'd love to be doing, but I'm not really nailing any of them, right? So I'd say start there. Like, what are your core ways? I'm going to take these 3 things, and these are how I'm going to go after buyers. I'm going to put process and potentially workflows into place to make sure that that process of me getting those leads is scalable, is automated as much as possible. So when you think about that, how much effort does it take from you? And is there ways for you to take some of that effort and for those things to still be happening? Some of those things come from technology. Some of those things come from process. Some of those things come from automation. So specifically, let's say I have a pay-per-click campaign. Well, that's great. But what happens when that lead clicks? How is it captured? Where is it going? Do I have automation in place to ensure that I'm not manually typing that lead in, if possible, into Realvolve? Is it automatically coming into Realvolve for me and potentially having a workflow auto started on it and potentially some automation behind an auto contact attempt for that client without me doing anything? I could be sitting on my couch eating Doritos, and those things could be happening behind the scenes. So, if I get 50 people clicking on my website and I'm coming in here and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, I'm adding them into my CRM, and then I'm trying to figure out what to do with each one of them, half of my day is gone. So, and again, it kind of, when you look at this, to me, it's still a funnel, right? Where am I getting these leads from? Have I made a concisive effort to determine how I'm going to handle each type of lead that I receive? And what am I going to do with them based on a situation? So again, I'll go back to pay-per-click. If somebody clicks on an ad that I'm running and I've thrown them into Realvolve, what am I going to do with them? What am I committing to handle that lead with? What is the best way that I convert them? So let's say that I've decided I'm going to put them on lead buyer, and 7 days of initial contact attempts where I want to get a hold of them. I want to see what their needs are. I want to see how I can help them, and I want to determine their next steps. You've got long-term buyer that once you reach that lead, maybe they told you, I'm going to do something, I'm just not ready to do it right now. And so we have a process put into place to where we don't just lose those people, because that's typically what happens, right? So yeah, that person's going to do something in 5 months, but if you're banking on that person picking up the phone in 5 months and calling you, success rate, not there. You put the proper processes into place where that person knows that you've spent 5 months trying to educate them, that you care about their needs, and that you're doing everything you can for them. You have that buyer most of the time. You want an active buyer workflow in place so that you're managing the people that you're actively out showing property to and that are ready to buy a home right now as soon as they find the right one. That buyer finds the right house, they go on a contract to close workflow. Again, at closing, you have a reminder that starts your client on a contact nurture campaign so that you're nurturing them for years to come. Oftentimes, really when you get into kind of narrowing it down, and once I pull up this worksheet, I'll kind of help you. You really want to think about, do you need to handle sellers separately from buyers? Okay. So I put two different things on here. You got buyer contract to close, seller contract to close. The reason we separate those out is because I speak differently. Let's take one activity, for example. We have an email as soon as you go under contract called your opening email to your client. I speak differently in that email to a buyer than I would a seller. But if my process is similar enough to where I'm doing the same things that I would with a buyer with a seller, I could have a contract to close. But we don't, right? We're doing different things. I'll put another thing. In the sell side contract to close, we may need to provide the buyer's agent, if we're the listing agent, with a copy of the utilities. On the flip of that, if I'm representing the buyer, I may need to request a copy of those utilities. So the process is different, okay? So I'm really thinking about, are the things that I'm doing for a buyer different for a seller? And the reason we separate out lead buyer versus lead seller is because of verbiage, okay? So if I am trying to, let's take long-term buyer and long-term seller. So again, we have that workflow that manages somebody that's going to, we vetted them. They're an active client in the future. They're just not ready right now. And so again, I talked about the importance of educating them. I'm not going to speak to a buyer the same way I am a seller, okay? The buyer needs to know what's going on with the current market. They need to know about lending. They need to know about, all these things that are specific when you're buying, whereas the education for a seller is different. So I'm going to handle those in different workflows. Whereas you may have other workflows that are the same. So for instance, if I created a workflow where I wanted to do a pie giveaway around every holiday or a holiday party, I'm not going to treat buyers differently than I am sellers. And I can kind of handle that as one workflow. I don't really need to separate that out.
And you can certainly, for the buyer contract to close and the seller contract to close, if you're handling both sides, you can start both of them. It might be worth having a buyer and seller contract to close where it's one together, but you can have as many different workflows running at the same time for the same contact or property or transaction as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm personally not a fan of running buyer and contract to close on top of each other. If you're doing enough to where you're representing both sides and dual agency is acceptable in your area, like Mark said, it probably absolutely is worth taking a look at building a buyer and seller contract to close so that you're properly handling both of those. Another one that I personally had a need for was a new construction contract to close. Even specifically, I built one out to where when I handled buyers, because I would also represent builders, I had a buyer contract to close for new construction and a contract to close for new construction if I was the listing agent. And so, is that what I'm suggesting for your processes? No, but I'm asking you to take a really deep look at what are the things that you're currently doing and how do they differ, so that you have the correct workflow suite that is currently going to, manage your business best. And then I wanted to implement or think about, triggers, because we could build out 15 workflows. And if they're just sitting in your account and you're not knowing when or how to utilize them, they're not going to do you a lot of good. And so, especially if you have admin or you have a team, empowering them with the knowledge of what to do when is super important. And so part of that worksheet that I'm going to give you guys today says, if this happens, what am I going to do? And it's kind of you taking, instead of, reactively saying, again, I got an email, now I got a new contract, now I'm just going to email it out. And then on 2 days, what do I need to do with that? The thought process then becomes, I put someone under contract, I start a workflow. This happens, I start a workflow. This happens, I start a workflow. So understanding the suite of workflows that you need and when you do what you're doing, those two things are crucial. So
And some workflows may just be one activity. I mean, it could just be one process. Other workflows can be hundreds of activities. So it just really depends on the process itself and, how complex is it? If it's, if you've got a cancellation of a contract, well, there needs to be a process for whenever I cancel. It's not just a thing I do off the top of my head. I'm actually got a process. I mean, it's the whole idea of McDonald's and how they put their hamburger together. And it's a process.
Exactly. And I'm not, you joke about the two types of people that one of them are lining their pencils up and the other one can't find their pencils, right? I'm the type of person that I can't find my pencils. I know I have pencils somewhere, but they're everywhere. And so it was so important when we were building a team and I needed to feel comfortable enough to have a transaction coordinator and, somebody that was calling leads and these other things that we put into place, that I gave them the tools and resources that they needed to succeed every single day. And a lot of that lived in my mind. And the way that I got that out of my mind and empowered them to do their job was with workflows. So the buyer signs up to view properties on your website. Right now, you probably have a notification. You may log into the back end of your website and just see that. The question you're asking yourself is, what are you doing when you're seeing this? What is happening? And really, you want to make sure that you have some kind of buyer lead workflow being started to ensure that you're vetting and taking care of that lead to kind of see what they need and when they need it. You receive an email with a new buyer lead from a referral company. I see a lot of this. What's happening, right? We have, there's some capability there to use email parsers to get that information out of your email through Zapier and into Realvolve and a workflow started. So I just got a new lead. I accepted it. That information's grabbed from my email, thrown through Zapier into Realvolve, and that person's being treated like any other lead that I need to vet and to get started in my processes. Buyer request information on one of your properties on Facebook. Capturing that lead's information, again, probably through Zapier, having it thrown into Realvolve, and I'm starting a workflow. Now, a lot of these say buyer lead workflows. And in my opinion, as long as I build my buyer lead workflow in a way that works for all of these situations, I can start the same workflow on a variety of instances. But if you have special processes for people that you receive from a referral company that differ from the way that you would handle other internet capture leads, then maybe you need to have a separate workflow that handles that specific situation. And a lot of that you may not know, but again, our departments here, that's exactly what we do. We have the expertise and the team that can help you and guide you with these decisions and make sure that you're putting the right suite of workflows into place. And seller inquires on one of your mailers, so how is that captured and being put on? Are you dealing with that seller lead other than taking the phone call and just saying, yeah, 123 Main Street still for sale. Have a good day. Click. You take that phone call 20 times and you could have converted, 2 or 3 of those and just making up numbers here. But the potential in you losing that is 1,000% worth you stopping and making sure that you're vetting every single one of those phone calls to make sure that you capture the amount of business that you can. So I've kind of put into place a series of steps. And all of these steps happen in sequential order, and they happen with triggers and workflows. And so I put a scenario in here, and then I put down my action steps on what my thought process is on how I would handle this. So a buyer requests additional information on a property in Zillow. The lead is added through Realvolve, again, through automation from Zapier, comes in through Zillow, into Zapier, too many Z's, thrown into Realvolve and automatically added. And then I have them auto started on the lead buyer workflow automatically. So then it may take me a couple days, but I contact that lead. The lead is qualified. They're not moving to the area for 4 months. I'm going to start them on long-term buyer workflow. Maybe month 3, I've talked to them. They're ready to start viewing property. I stop them on that one workflow, and I'm going to start them on active buyer workflow. Once they find their right property, my trigger is an offer is accepted and received. I'm going to start buyer contract to close. It's closing day. The buyer is launched on a long-term nurture campaign, in this case, 10-year contact nurture, so that you don't lose them. I put together a video inside of Realvolve outlining each one of these processes. Obviously, what I'm talking about is months of work, but I kind of went through each one so that you could kind of see it in the system.
And don't let months of work scare you. Right? You can do them a little bit at a time.
Yeah, no. A lead inquired on a property from Zillow. I have it set up so that inside of Zapier has a Zap setup that is paying attention or watching for a submission inside of Zillow. So when the buyer inquires, that information is sent over to Zapier. And because of the way that I've told Zapier to send that information over to Realvolve, a few things have happened. The contact was created or updated in Realvolve. I have had this contact has been tagged Zillow. It can be assigned a source of Zillow. And I've also started a workflow. In this case, I've started lead buyer. And so a few things have happened for this specific lead already because this workflow was auto started. If I click on my activities and completed, I can see that. I can see that an intro text was automatically sent out. An automatic email was immediately sent out. And then I, as the agent, also got a text that said that there is a new lead that has come in. And so in incomplete under radar, I can also have an introduction phone call that is assigned to me as the agent for me to make my initial phone call to this person. I've also brought in the information that was supplied by Zillow. In this case, the property URL that they're interested in, as well as their message and letting me know that this is a Zillow lead. If I click on the intro call, I'm given the mobile phone number, which I can easily access to give this person a call. I also have a notes field so that I can input information about the specific buyer. In this case, I talked to the buyer. They're going to purchase in this zip code, but they're not going to do it for 4 months. And so I've made my note. I've also put in whatever property they were interested in if I chose to do so. I've given myself a couple options here because I'm making my initial introduction call. I have made 2 actions, essentially choose my next step. It is logical for me to do one of these 2 paths. If I got a hold of the buyer and they're ready to go, they're qualified, I vetted them, I would likely start them on my active buyer workflow. But in this case, I've said I've talked to this person and they're a good buyer, they're qualified, but they're just not quite ready yet. It's going to take them a few months. So I don't want to treat them the same as I would an active buyer. I actually want to prolong or keep them nurtured for a longer period of time before I treat them like an active client. And so in this case, I can actually say, I want my next step to be to start long-term buyer workflow. When I hit run, this will start. I'll hit next. Going to ask me if I want to select all the activities. In this case, I do. I can assign which agent's responsible for these tasks. I can choose my start date, which would default till today. It's going to autofill all of the activities that are assigned. And when I see done, then this workflow will launch. A yellow bar will pop up and say, great, this has started. So in this case, I initially started lead buyer, which the point is make initial contact with this person, vet them, and decide their next step. I've done that. I don't need to run lead buyer anymore. So I'm going to hover over an activity, click on the X, and delete all remaining. I could delete this one activity, but it still is going to have a lot of other activities that would, pertain to me making initial contact with the buyer, and I don't want to do that. If I click delete all, it's going to delete records of things that are still due in the future, but also things that I've already done in the past. And so I don't want to delete that I sent an intro text and the intro email. I want to keep record of all of those. So I'm not going to click on delete all. I'm actually going to click delete all remaining. And what that's going to do is going to delete anything that's still to be done, but keep record of things that I have already completed. So once I click delete all remaining, and I refresh my page, then I have started long-term buyer. So now you can see that under my radar tab, I now have long-term buyer running. And so essentially this is going to be 12 months of me keeping less frequent contact, maybe once a month or however you decide to run or edit your workflow. But the goal being that I have a buyer that I want to stay in front of periodically until they're ready to buy. I want to send them informational emails. I want to give them periodic phone calls to let them know that I'm there for them if they have to answer any questions. And so in this case, I'm applying a tag. And I have a series of monthly phone calls, monthly emails, so that I can keep in contact with this person. And so let's fast forward a little bit and say that I've reached my monthly call 3. I'm given the mobile phone number, again, so that I have easy access. I can also input any notes that I want to, and I can update the last call date. So I did this today. Great. If I didn't get a hold of this person, I built this activity so that I have a checking in text. I could send that if I want to. In this case, I'll pretend that I spoke with them, and I'm going to hit save and close. And I've done this. Now, once I convert this buyer and they are ready to start looking at property, another option I have, instead of going to your radar tab, clicking start a workflow, I could come in and say, okay, this person's ready now. I'm going to start them on active buyer workflow. It's completely fine. But I also have set up my activities to where I have told the system that if I try to stop long-term buyer, and again, to stop an activity, I hover over an activity and I click on the X. What is the next logical workflow? And for long-term buyer, ideally, I would love to get this person off of long-term buyer and onto active buyer because they're now ready to do something. So I come here and I'm going to click on this X. And again, we just talked about this. More than likely, I'm going to click delete all remaining to keep a record of those things I've already done. And now this pops up and it says, do you want to start active buyer? And that's because I've set what's called an alternative workflow. So when you're building your workflows, you can tell the system, if I go to stop this workflow, what is my next logical path? And my best case scenario, again, is active buyer. So yes, I do want to start active buyer. I've set up groups. In this case, I want to know, is this person a referral or not a referral? Because if I have, if Beth Homebuyer was referred to me by someone, then I want to keep that person that referred me that business up to date. I want to send them periodic things. I want to make sure that they know that Beth Homebuyer is being taken care of. But in this case, this lead came from Zillow. It was not a referral. I don't need to update anyone, so I can deselect this group. I'm going to hit next. Again, I'm going to assign who's going to be the buyer agent in this situation. Hit next. In this case, it wants a start date and a next appointment date. Beth Home Buyer is an active buyer. She's ready to go. I just don't quite know when I'm going to show her that next property. And so I'm just going to leave that blank, and because I don't know that at the time I'm starting my workflow. I'm going to hit next. And again, once I hit done, it's going to pop up a yellow bar and it's going to create those activities for me. So at this point, Beth Home Buyer inquired on Zillow, was automatically sent over to Realvolve via Zapier. A workflow, lead buyer workflow was automatically started. And again, the lead buyer's goal is make initial contact and vet this buyer and decide what is their next step. In this case, I got a hold of Beth Home Buyer, and her best situation was to be on a long-term buyer workflow so that she could be nurtured over time until she was ready to move forward. I got the indication that she's ready to go look at property, and so I started her on my active buyer workflow. And my active buyer workflow is going to do many things, but it's going to mostly facilitate anything that I would need to do with a buyer that's ready to view property and ready to write an offer once they find that perfect home. And so a few things that I'm doing automatically, I'm confirming my buyer appointment details. When's that next appointment? I'm going to send a funding email over to Beth and basically ask, in this case, I have 3 different emails. I have an email that if she already has a lender, that's great. I need a copy of your pre-qualification letter. If she's looking for a lender, I can provide her my preferred lender list. And if she's a cash buyer, that verbiage for my email is going to be make sure that you have verification of funds or what you need specifically because you're doing cash. And so I've set up things that are specific activities that are going to help me show property, that are going to help me educate and work more closely with a buyer that's ready to start viewing property. And so I'm going to let this run through the course of me working one-on-one to find Beth Home Buyer a house. And then once I've done that, I'm going to stop active buyer. Again, deleting all remaining. And now Beth Home Buyer has found a house. Okay, so we don't manage transactions under the contract. They're actually managed in transactions. And we don't currently have a transaction created because Beth Home Buyer just went under contract today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this plus sign and I'm going to create a transaction. And so in this case, she's going to purchase 123 Billy Street. And I'm going to come to my radar tab and I'm going to start my next workflow because my trigger in this instance is the fact that I have a buyer with accepted offer. And so once I have a buyer with accepted offer, then my trigger is to start buyer contract to close. And so once I do that, I'm going to click start a workflow. I'm going to select my next workflow, buyer contract to close. I've got my options to deselect my groups. In this case, again, this was not a referral, so I don't need to keep that referral up to date. 123 Billy Street does not have an HOA, so I don't need to see tasks pertaining to that. Also, there's no radon or well inspection. So I deselected the groups that are not applicable in this specific scenario, and I'm going to hit next. In this case, I've got a buyer's agent and a buyer's transaction coordinator. So I'm going to use my drop downs and select what role is being done by who, and I'm going to hit next. Once I've done that, my left side will fill out my right side. And so I'm going to scroll through and enter the dates that I know at the time that I'm launching this workflow. In this case, my acceptance date is today. I know my financing contingency date is the 17th of May. I think we're going to close, according to the contract, at the end of June. Earnest money, let's say it's going to be due next week. I don't have the date for the roof inspection yet. I don't have the date for the home inspection yet. There is no second earnest deposit. Don't know the final walkthrough or the pool septic inspection or the termite inspection. So I scrolled through and I verified that I've input the dates that I know at the time of acceptance. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to hit next. And then again, the left side is going to fill out the right side for me. So I'm going to come through, and if I already have these people in the system, then I can go ahead and start entering them. So as I start to type, then it's going to fill it out. There is no second buyer. The buyer agent, in this case, is me. Maybe I don't have the seller agent in the system. Maybe I go to type it in and that person's not pulling up. I'm going to have to add them in as a contact. So I'm not going to be able to do that from this tab, but I can add them in the future. In the lender, I have the lender in the system, and then my title company is also in the system. So I can go ahead and add them. All right, so once I've verified I've added the people that I currently have in the system, I'm going to hit done. It's going to take a couple minutes. It's going to create those activities for me. Everything from making sure I have earnest money to facilitating inspections, preparing the buyer for closing, everything that I would want to do, make sure they get utility information. A lot of detail goes into that contract to close process. And kind of to finish out this loop, one of the things that we're going to be doing in contract to close is, we'll give this a few minutes to load, is launching our 10-year of contact nurture. Because when you think about the life cycle of this buyer, okay, this buyer came in and was started on lead buyer. I converted her, or I qualified her to then go on long-term buyer so she didn't fall through the cracks. Once she was finished with long-term buyer and she told me that she's ready to start looking at property, I stopped long-term buyer and I put her on active buyer. The buyer, or in this case, she stayed on, Beth Home Buyer stayed on active buyer until she was able to go under contract. We stopped active buyer workflow, created the transaction, and launched the contract to close workflow. If we just let contract to close workflow run, then at the end of this, at post-closing, at some point we would have no more activities, okay? So we followed up post-closing, 2 weeks, maybe 6 months. But what happens long-term? To ensure the success of this contact or this client, I want to ensure that she's likely going to sell Billy Street in the future. She may have referrals for me. This is somebody I want to maintain contact with. And through one of your activities in your contract to close process, you'll have an activity that's entitled Start the Contact on 10-Year Contact Nurture. And so essentially what it's going to do is create or start Beth Home Buyer on 10 years of being nurtured. So quarterly contacts, how's the house, how's the kids, the family. You're going to celebrate birthdays if they're in the system, home purchase anniversaries, which you have now because she's purchased 123 Billy Street, and any other dates that you've chosen to put into your 10-year contact nurture workflow. And so now that this is loaded, let's see what that looks like. So all right, so because I told the system that we are anticipated to close June 30th, I have a task that I've created as part of my buyer contract to close process that's going to start this client on 10-year contact nurture. And so I've created a checklist for myself that has ensured that I update the home purchase anniversary date on the contract record or the contact record. And I've confirmed birthdays and any other anniversaries before starting the workflow. So I haven't done that yet. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go into Beth Home Buyer's contact record. Under the contact tab, I'm going to scroll down to personal details, and I'm going to update the information that I know. In this case, at closing, I had her fill out a contact sheet where she updated and told me that her birthday is actually April 3rd. Now, if you do not track years, you can decide to put this year, you can put 1900, you can, do it just however you want. But in this case, I just want to track that she was born on April 3rd. I know that she closed on her property January 30th, and she hadn't sold a house prior to this. And so now I've done that. And so the system will refresh itself, update that, and store that under Beth Homebuyer. And I can go back into my activities list and complete that task that I was just working on. Now, right now, because this task is not set to show up until the day that you close, I'm actually having to come into the activity tab and into complete, and I'm kind of having to look for it. Now, when this activity is actually due on the day of closing, it's going to be in your activities, and it'll show you that it's actually due that day. So I'm kind of coming into a future due task, and I'm going to click here. I'm going to verify I did do this, and I did do this. As soon as I verify that I've done both of those things, it gives me another option. In this case, start 1RV10. 1RV10 is your 10-year of contact nurture workflow. And so once I do this and I hit run, then the system went into Beth Homebuyer, or in this case, buyer 1 and buyer 2, depending on how I set up my workflow. And it started that contact on a series of nurture activities for 10 years so that I don't lose touch with that person. And so through, triggers and actions, I have 4 or 5 workflows that have basically ensured that I've converted this lead, I've nurtured them as a client, I have managed their transaction, and now I have them on a 10-year campaign so that I don't lose touch, and then I can go through this process again whenever Beth Homebuyer decides if she wants to sell 123 Main Street. Okay, so
A lot of information there.
It was a lot of information, right? And I'll go back to it was recording, but I want to emphasize the fact that detailed instruction is not so much about the intricate parts of everything that was happening. It's more about the cycle, okay? And it doesn't necessarily matter that lead just came from Zillow. It matters that how you're going to funnel each type of buyer lead that you have. So do you have a plan of action for each type of lead that you have coming in? Buyers, sellers? Do you need to differentiate how you treat somebody that comes in from Zillow versus realtor.com versus your website versus an email or referral? Taking the time to really understand where your business is coming from and how you're going to treat each type of these people. So again, running through this on the sell side, just looking at everything in terms of triggers and workflows. Let's say that somebody submits a property valuation on your website. We want to get that lead into Realvolve, automated as possible, start them on a seller lead workflow automatically if we can. You're going to attempt to contact that lead, verify, and ideally set a listing appointment. You would want to know that if you set a listing appointment, you start your listing appointment workflow. Once they sign with you, do you have processes in place that you're starting a pre-MLS workflow? And then once it goes live, ideally starting an active MLS workflow. If the seller requests a house or an open house, or that's your process, do you have something in place so that you're maximizing or optimizing your open house process through potentially an open house workflow? Once you receive an offer from a seller, you start your seller contract to close workflow. And again, at closing, you want to make sure you never lose touch with that contact, and you're going to start them on a nurture campaign.
Yeah, it's all about the phases of any process. And if you think about the entire process as a whole, like we've done here, where you've got the leads to the transaction, or leads to the property to the transaction, it can be overwhelming. Break each one of those down into smaller segments and think about what is that process.
Yeah, and I want to go over real quick. I'm going to jump around a little bit because I'm going to show you this. So one of the things that we're going to give away today, I put this together, okay? And I think that, take a copy of this, make your own copy, and take some time to think about that funnel for you. Where are the things that you're going to put in place for your sellers? How are you going to be capturing sellers? What would you need for property-wise, listing appointment, pre-MLS, active MLS? What are the workflows that you could see for your own business that you would need to manage a client when they're active? Contract to close once they go through, and do you have something in place to nurture them? So you think about this. I captured the lead, I managed the client, and I retained the client. It's always that process, okay? So it may be, the nuances may be different, but buyer, seller, regardless, capture them, convert them, keep them. And this is really kind of thinking about that. What are the things that I need? So come in here, maybe add some, take yours away, make sure that you have things that you need for your business. And so I put something in here, buyer, contractor, close. Ask yourself, am I doing enough new construction buyer business where my current contract to close process isn't working? There's no need to come in and just create a workflow if it doesn't work within your business. But if something can empower or automate your business, it's definitely worth putting it in this worksheet, even if you don't have it in place right now, and build up to that. And then I've added another selection with combined and other workflows, because again, you want to think about what are the things that it doesn't really matter that it's a buyer or a seller. I can do these things in general, and I don't need to treat the client differently, basically on what they're doing. And then also, you may have need for some of these other referrals that empower your business outside of that client conversion circle. And so some of those Mark had mentioned earlier, a canceled transaction workflow. Do you have processes in place for those instances? Hopefully not very often, where things just don't work out. Are you doing the things you need to do to get a buyer back into buy mode and to get a listing back on the market? Other workflows we've created, yearly reminders. What about those things that you should be doing every year or every so often? Updating your social media, changing out your profile pictures, updating your tags and your workflows. I mean, there's so many things that to be doing, but I promise you, if you're busy enough, you probably won't remember it when you need to be doing it. And a yearly agent reminder email is a great resource for that. Agent onboarding, agent recruiting, agent branding. Are you doing those things that make you look like a rock star and that make your name known in your community? Mentor mentee. I see a lot of people they're mentoring newer agents. Workflows can sometimes be used for that. And referral. Are you actively looking for referrals in other areas? Are you managing the referrals that you're receiving? And a workflow can be great on that. Another thing that we put in here is understanding your triggers. And I put some examples. Your triggers may be differently, but I think this is important, right? If this happens, what am I doing? And so taking some time, and these may not be things that you're doing, and I've added some extra spots for you to do that, but really think about the current things that you're doing and how you can see a workflow, put into place that could help you manage that better. So from today, I hope that you take away, have you designed your suite of workflows? If not, we're going to give away that worksheet. And even if you have, it's still worth taking a periodic look at, what am I currently doing? What could I be doing better? Do you and your admin understand your triggers? I see so often people have a suite of workflows, but they're not necessarily triggering correctly. They're not necessarily, every time this happens, am I doing this? And so I think by using that worksheet and really outlining, in my ideal world, if this happens, I do this, is instrumental to having success in using your workflows. And also, what can you do today to empower your workflow suite? And so I hope that you take some time and complete that workflow management worksheet that we're going to give away to you today. Mark said, like I said, there's no shortage of information. And I hope that, you take a bite at a time and don't eat the whole cake. Nobody's ever successful eating the whole cake. But again, if you need a starting point, your starting point is your pain points. What can I do right now to make my day-to-day easier? And that's what you focus on until you nail that. And then you move on to something else. Because again, you're only going to juggle so many balls that I throw at you. So make sure that you have the things that will help you right now, today, put into place first. As always, we have a premium services department. Our entire department's goal is to make you successful. So, we meet with you sometimes for 6 months bi-weekly, 3 months weekly. We have a kind of DIY online self-paced course that you can take to kind of, if you feel like that you have the knowledge or the know-how to do it on your own. And we want to make sure that you have resources. So my email is kendra@realvolve.com if you need anything or you have any questions. I'm here to help. Outside of these calls, we're here every Wednesday at the same time. But if you're logged into Realvolve, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a how do I button that will have a walk me feature that will kind of tell you step by step what to do. If you see something wrong within your system, you have a submit a support ticket button. You have a help button that essentially takes you to a searchable database of articles and blogs and things like that. And then we also, in the bottom right-hand corner, have a contact us chat option during man chat hours. So again, I want you to take that worksheet and I want you to use it, whether you have 15 workflows now or you have none. It can help you to really stop and think about, ideally, this is where I'd like to be at, and then make sure that those things are put into place. So if you'd like a copy of that, go ahead and put your email, your email into the chat, and we'll send you a copy of that. So just take that, go up to file, create a copy, and then you can start working on it. So Q&A. Love to answer any questions on anything we went over today and anything otherwise in the system. We're here to make sure that your questions are answered.
Kendra, I can place that link for them to download if you want.
Okay,
or you're
that's
going to
fine.
send it, right? Okay. In the chat, if you want to click on that link, it will have you immediately create a copy. It basically says, this is a copy version. You're not able to view the master of it, but certainly be able to click on it. It'll immediately come up and ask you to create a copy of that. And it should give you a way to name it as well, I believe, or it may just say copy of. Let's see, we do have, what's the best way to know if an existing workflow I have will work or if I need to create a new one?
I was just going to say, you want to start with the workflow, right? Are there certain things in there that aren't working? We do have workflow audit services to where if you need a call or two and we need to see if we're very familiar with the suite of workflows that we offer, and we'd definitely be willing to say, hey, this might be something you want to look at, and it may be worth your processes may be unique enough that it may be worth just empowering your own current processes with what you have.
I'm going to make a shameless plug. A lot of what Kendra has talked about and stuff, I also have in the book that I wrote called Our Best Workflow Secrets. There's a lot of things in there that would help. You can get that on Amazon, but there are countless ways that you can use your existing core elements, the core strategies that I talk about for conversions, operations, and retention. And that's what she was saying, the processes that you go through for getting those leads, converting those leads, and retaining those leads. And if you can do that and use systems to do it automatically for you, you can scale your business. I mean, that is what it's all about. If you don't have these systems in place, you can't grow. You cannot grow. And ultimately, you're going to lose business to those people that do, because they can grow, they can go. So something to just really think about whenever you're putting together your thoughts on how do I do what I do. Break it up into different segments of the process. What are those elements that you're doing as far as the phases of your business? And then identify, where do I need the most help? If it's right now, if you don't have any workflows set up right now, what's the biggest pain point that you've got? And create that as the first workflow. And then go on. Most of the time, it's a matter of, I can bring in leads, but once I get a lead, what am I doing? What are the things that I can do so I don't lose that lead? And you've got to contact them multiple times, 15, 20 times sometimes at the very beginning before you ever get in communication with them. And if you don't stick with it, they're going to go to somebody else. So you've got to have a process in place that automatically emails, automatically texts, reminds you to make those phone calls. Otherwise, you'll forget. Once you get that lead and go through the process and convert that lead, now we go through operations. What are all the things that I do for my listing process, for my transaction process? And even if you just put a few things of stumbling blocks or things that you do commonly, but could be automated, that's going to start saving you time. The nice part about that is once those systems are in place, even if you've got room, maybe you've got room to add on some new team members, those team members now have that process available, and you can just start moving them right in. Or if a team member leaves or is on vacation or whatever, somebody can kick in and do their process for them during that time they're gone. So now you're not missing, you're not letting things drop through the cracks. And then it goes through the retention and all the things that you do for your customers to retain them, because it's cheaper to retain a customer than to find new ones.
Yeah. That's and what you're saying reminds me of something, and my final thought on this is, it's all about how you think about it. And if you're thinking about the thought of putting all these processes into place and it's like, it's daunting to you, it should be exciting, because what it reminds me of is the difference between, I don't want to take my client's hand and run with them, right? Because I'm running all over the place, and I'm, by the time I get to the end of that, I'm tired. I have to run back, grab another hand. What I think of it as is I'm going to step back, and I'm essentially going to put an assembly line into place so that I can stand in one spot and I can overview my processes to where I'm not exhausting myself and everything's happening. The same clients are getting the best experience that they can get. And I have done it in a way that I have taken as much off of my plate and put automation into process, or into process that's happening every single time something happens.
And I did put the name of that book on there, Jenny. Our Best Workflow Secrets, a real estate agent's guide to success in the business, even in a changing market. Got a lot of good stuff in there. Like I said, shameless plug, but I want to make sure you guys have resources. Any other questions? No, we're over time. Don't see any. All right, guys. Thank you. Kendra, that was an amazing session. Great job. And appreciate you every time you share your a wealth of information, and I surely appreciate it. So everybody, we will see you next week. And if you want to join us again, and we'll just send you off and hope that you have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, next week we're going to be talking about common questions that you guys have. So if you guys have something you'd like to cover next week, email me, Kendra@realvolve.com, and I can add it into what we talk about. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.